Welcome back, everyone, to Mongols. This is our prediction show. I am Mike. Joining me is Justin. Justin, before we get into what exactly the prediction show is, how are you doing? How's your week been?
I am great. I'm loving getting to talk about the Riverhounds on a Friday. This is awesome.
I know. And this sort of segues into, in the past we've kind of done the one main show on Monday nights, and I felt like we were always getting to the end of that show, and we were just like, we're playing Memphis. Give us a score prediction. We had no idea like what to expect from Memphis, and it was also a bit anticlimactic because we would talk about it on Monday, and then just kind of sit all week and wait for something to happen on the weekend. And so if you subscribe to the show, you'll notice we put out a series of shows over the course of the week. We talked to Lawrence Doherty from 901 Soccer Pod earlier in the week, and then we followed that up with an interview with Kenny to get the Riverhound side of things. And so this show is where we kind of take all of that information that we've learned and we do a proper prediction. We talked on Monday a little bit about the goalie controversy. Okay, so based on what we're hearing, where do we land? What do we actually think is going to happen in the game this weekend? We'll do score predictions and just try to get a better sense of what we actually expect to happen. And so one of the things that we did was we put out a call online to see if anybody else has predictions that they think is worth discussing, and that'll be probably something we do on a regular basis as well. So a couple of changes that are happening here over on the Mongol side to try to get you more information so that you're better prepared, at least narratively, as we go into each of these games, and it feels like it increases the stakes of the games a little bit as well. So yeah, I've enjoyed sort of talking about in two hounds in some regard all week, and this is something we're going to keep trying to do, just to keep the hounds content flowing. So that's what this is. I guess for a quick recap, and many of you who have subscribed have been listening to the shows. You've gotten some of this content already, but we talked to Lawrence Doherty, as I mentioned, from 901 Soccer Pod to get the sense of what is actually going on in Memphis right now. A couple of things that sort of jumped out, and you could see some of this from the stats. Their offense is firing right now, and this was something that Kenny mentioned too. Specifically, Marlon and Bruno Lappa are the guys to watch. They both have 4 goals in their last 4 games, and they aren't afraid to shoot from outside the 18. The one other wild card to keep an eye out for that Lawrence mentioned is Zach Duncan. He's an Australian midfielder. He's the one that pulls the strings and make things happen. It sounds almost like our Danny Griffin or Kenny Forbes. So that'll be the other one to keep an eye out on. In terms of weaknesses, Lawrence alluded to the fact that if you can sort of get in their head, they kind of crumble a little bit. So, this might be another game where it's in our best interest to try to score early, which we'll talk about whether or not we think that'll happen. But if we could, it has the potential to hopefully start a chain reaction for us. But otherwise, Memphis is a hot team right now. They lost their first 5, but since then they have 3 wins and a draw, and their last 4 averaging 2 and 3/4 goals a game. So they're going to come out. They're going to try to score. From the Riverhound side, well, I guess first of all, I'll stop there. Justin, any thoughts on just that stuff that we got from Lawrence? Was there anything that sort of jumped out at you that you'll be paying more attention to this weekend?
Yeah, it's hard to pay attention to a lot of teams in the league at a time. And so just hearing how hot they are kind of coming into this game, like, they've been unbeaten in the last 4 after losing 4 in a row or something. That's kind of wild. So, I think it will be interesting to see, how they come out. And it seems like it is one of those things of a very defensive Bob Lilly team against a very offensive Memphis team, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays out throughout the game.
Yeah, agreed. After that, we talked to King Kenny, Coach Kenny, which it sounds like, interestingly, maybe the coach moniker isn't as strong as we were led to believe, but that's okay. Kenny said he's very much focused on trying to get a championship this season because he doesn't know how many seasons he has left. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as the season develops. But I did think it was interesting. He mentioned that he called sort of a senior player meeting on Monday to discuss sort of how the team fell apart in the second half against North Carolina. Those are the kind of things that you love to see, like the players sort of taking
Mhm.
ownership for what's happening, trying to identify the problems. And basically, he feels that they need to be better under pressure, and not panic as much. I mean, Justin, when you heard they had a team meeting, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that I thought was great. And the other thing that I thought was interesting from that interview was him talking about translating for Bob from a
Yeah,
player's perspective. And I could see how a young player could come into Bob's system and hear, hey, get forward, get forward, get forward. And so they always want to get forward. And then there's moments in the game where you got to get back. And so I
yeah,
think like he's trying to say like, hey, in this scenario, yeah, you need to get forward. In this scenario, you need to get back. And but as soon as you can, or as soon as the game shifts a little bit, you got to get forward again. And I thought that was real interesting because I do think Bob's system is a very complicated system for a young player who may not be used to playing it. And so somebody like Kenny, who's been around Bob for 10 years or whatever he's been around, can kind of translate some of that. I think would be really helpful.
yeah. It'll be interesting to see, what sort of happens beyond this, because the entire time that Bob has been here, he's had Kenny to do some of that translating. And so if there is a, future, which we know it'll happen at some point, but where we might have Bob and not Kenny on the field, how does that ultimately impact, how the players are performing based on what Lily's expecting? We'll have to sort of wait and see.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of, we mentioned that Memphis lost their first 5 games and then haven't lost in their past 4, and they're on a bit of a hot streak. I think, Justin, as you pointed out, we lost our first 3 games of the season, but we also haven't lost since. So it's been 7 games, 3 wins, 4 draws. So while we did feel a bit not doom and gloomy on Monday after the game against North Carolina, you aptly were like, look, guys, like pump the brakes. Like this isn't as bad as we thought. um I'm assuming that your thoughts on things have only improved since then.
Yeah, yeah, and we can probably get into some of the details of this, but I think it's interesting how Pat Hogan missed the first 2 games of the season, then subbed into the third, and has started every game since. Because Sterling was obviously out for the first 3 games of the season with visa issues, and then was able to sub in to the fourth one, and then has started almost every game since. And I do think like not that those two players have changed the game or revolutionized the team, but I think coming up with some of the consistency there and what they've given to the team so far has actually helped a lot. And so I think some of this is just gaining some consistency of players and team, players and um, some of the shifts that were made after that third game of the season with Danny Griffin stepping back into midfield, and some of that has definitely helped this team a lot. And so yeah, I've been a lot more positive as I've started to compare some things and started to dig in a little bit. I've been a lot more positive about the team.
Good. Good, good. Just looking at sort of the all-time series between these two teams, I think Lawrence mentioned that he didn't think that Memphis has ever beaten the Hounds. Actually, we've played 6 times. The Hounds have won 5. Memphis did win once, but it was at Highmark in 2022. The last time we went to AutoZone Park, which is where we will be this weekend, the Hounds won 3-1. It was a Dequa hat trick, so Dequa's not here. Do with that what you will. Um, I don't put a ton of weight in these kinds of stats. I tend to think like game by game. Kenny seemed to, I didn't ask him that question specifically, but he does seem to be very much in a game by game mentality. Do you put any weight in like this idea that sometimes teams just have your number?
Yeah, I think I do, and I think I've seen that along the way. Now, the interesting thing about the USL is there's times where a team will totally shift in an off season, and all of a sudden you don't
Hmm.
have that team's number anymore because of a coaching change, player change, whatever, system change, something shifted in the off season. So could that be this off season? Yeah, it could be, but I do put weight in. There is, as inconsistent as rosters can be, there is some consistency of maybe a coach and a system and all of that kind of stuff, and maybe that's what's happening here. So maybe we'll continue that. Who knows?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about our predictions for the Hounds. So looking back at the team, we'll just go back to front and see if we can pick
Mhm.
who we think our starting 11 will be. So we talked a little bit on Monday about some of the hate that seemed to be thrown Gabby's way. Obviously, there's some hardcore. I need to rephrase how I approach this. There's some people who really like Dick in goal, and there's also Randolph that's sort of sitting in the wings. So,
Yes.
after a week to kind of let things simmer, who do you think is going to start in goal this weekend?
I think Parada starts again. I think Bob's kind of made that shift. It's been 3 games in a row that Parada started with the Open Cup game. Um, so I do think that's probably the case. One of the things that I thought was interesting, we have been there has been some hate and some different things, and it was interesting. I looked back last year to see where we were through 10 games. Obviously, we led the league in clean sheets last year. And so I was trying to figure out where we were through 10 games. Through 10 games last year, we only had 2 clean sheets, and we've already had
Mm.
4 this season. And so I thought that was an interesting thing because we have been like, oh, goalkeeper, 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 but it's like, all right, we're just not scoring. Like that's actually
Yeah.
the issue is we're
Yeah.
not scoring. It's not necessarily that we're not playing having good defense. It's just we haven't been scoring. And now how we got to 15 was we had two streaks of 4 clean sheets last season at 2 different times in the season. So that definitely helps you get to 15 clean sheets. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how things develop. But I do think Parada is probably there
Yeah.
this upcoming game.
I agree. I think Gabby gets a start. Looking across the back line, at least for the past few games, we really haven't changed who is there. It's typically been Biasi, Hogan, Asumanu, Etu, and Blackstock, if you consider them sort of along the back. Are you thinking that we'll see something similar this weekend?
I don't think we'll see. Yeah, I think 4 of those spots are locked down. I think
Okay.
between Itu and then your 3 center backs of Biazi, Hogan, Osumano, they've been fairly consistent, and especially just those 3 center backs, Osumano, Biazi, Hogan, they've played 88% of the season together. So out of the available minutes to the 3 of them, the 3 of them have played 88% of those minutes. And so I don't really see any changes there. The one exception to that was I think Suber got a start at center back one time and Biazzi got switched out to right back. But it's been fairly consistent, of the 3 of them at center back, at least since Hogan's been back. The right back spot's an interesting one for me, looking kind of what's been happening is he's been switching back and forth between Rovi and Blackstock. And so Blackstock has 5 starts, Rovi has 4 starts. I think Biazzi has that other one. And so
Mhm.
could we see a shift there? Could Rovi start there this time? Maybe. It has seemed to be and I don't know what the shift is. Is it tactical? Is it performance? I don't know. But it was interesting looking into that a little bit today. But I think we see it fairly consistent between Blackstock and Rovi. It's one of the two.
Yeah. Do you think at all? So, we talked a little bit about how we expect Memphis to have sort of this additional firepower that maybe we haven't seen thus far. Do you foresee Lilly making any changes along the defensive line, maybe switching to maybe more of a flat 4 in the back to try to defend against that? Or do you think that the move might be well, a couple options. We could do nothing. We could basically just like roll out the same lineup that we have been. You could make some sort of defensive change. You can make a change in the midfield in theory, like add another holding midfielder. But in terms of, since we're talking about defense at this point, do you think Lilly would make a change here, or do you think he stays with what's been working thus far?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he has to be fairly happy with what's going on because he hasn't really made any changes. Only game we've
Hmm.
played a Fat Four has been the Open Cup game, and so
Yeah.
I don't know that I would not expect to see any changes in our back five, back three, back five, whatever you want to call it, in this
Yeah.
game.
That's fair. Moving up to the midfield, it's been Mertz, Griffin, Forbes all along. There's been some variability where every so often he'll put in Sample and take out one of the forwards. Do you think that this is a case where we might see something like a Sample or even a Walty to try to shield the defense a little bit?
Yeah, that's where I could see a shift. And I looked at that same statistic of like how many minutes those guys have played. And when you talk about Mertz, Griffin, Forbes, they've played 92% of the minutes available to them
Hmm.
so far this season. And so, yeah, you're gonna see those 3 most likely. And all 3 of them have appeared in all 10 games so far. And so I don't think a shift. I do think that could be a shift where we see an additional midfielder come in, with the one striker up top, and that has worked fairly well, so far. The 2 games we've done that have been the 3-1 win at Phoenix and the 2-2 draw against Tulsa. So could that be a shift that might work? Actually, yeah, maybe. And if we can keep Memphis off the board, maybe we score a couple.
I was gonna say in those 2 games, what, 5 goals? So averaging 2.5
Yep.
goals a game, which has been our problem thus far. So maybe that is a key. Let's stack the midfield a little bit more and let the one
Yep.
forward run free. In that
Yep.
case, who do you think starts up top? Is it Kizza? Is it Sterling? Is it somebody else?
Uh, I either one. That's
Yeah.
been those have been the two consistent names. I mean, Deanne has played in 9 of the 10 games so far, but 6 of those were substitute appearances. So like he hasn't started up there yet. EJ has been in 4 of the games so far, but obviously hasn't started up there yet. So I do see most likely I would guess it's Kizza or Sterling. If it's both of them, it's probably going to be both of them. I don't see Bob making a shift there. Could it be time to start shifting some things up? Maybe, but it hasn't seemed to be that way so far.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I don't know if I have a strong sense. I'll say Kizza just because it feels like Kizza's been scoring more recently, and you bring in Sterling as a sub. But this game, you and I were talking a little bit off air. I don't know where to land on this game, like because it very much feels like a case where, as you said, we need to be scoring goals, and Memphis is clearly scoring goals. So,
Mhm.
as we sort of look ahead to actually like thinking about how this will all shake out beyond just the players on the field, I kind of feel like Memphis is good for at least 2 goals. So, do I see a situation where the Hounds either A, sort of stop them in ways that these other teams haven't stopped them, or B, we're able to get more than 2 goals, when we've obviously struggled recently. The opportunities have been there. Like we've definitely gotten ourselves into positions to score. But is this the game that we capitalize on them? I don't know. How do you feel about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. One of the things that I really have, I don't think, I don't think I was feeling this. And then when I looked at the statistics, one of the things that I thought, or just looked at kind of our first 10 games and trying to get a handle on what's been happening. One of the things that we've talked about Bob a lot is that he tinkers and he changes things and he shifts things and he does different formations and he puts different players in different positions, which is what he's not doing this year. Like he has
Mm,
not done that. And I think one of the things that I think is interesting is there've been 5 players on the team this year who have played more than 90% of the available minutes so far this season. Those 5 players have been Griffin has played every minute. Osumanu has played 871 out of 900, and then Biazi, Mertz, and Atu are somewhere in the mid 800s of the time that they played so far. Then, if you want to throw Hogan and Sterling on top of that for the available minutes that they play in the games in which they have been available, they're in the 90% range as well. I think of minutes that they've played. And what was interesting about that is looking back at last season, Ordonez was the only player who played 90% of the minutes last year. And so it's been interesting to see like Bob hasn't been tinkering or changing things or shifting. And that could be 2 things. One, you have a really good starting lineup who have been doing what Bob wants. And so he's like really pleased with that. Or you only have one starting lineup that you feel good
right.
about. And you're just like, we have no depth. We think we
Right.
have depth, but we have no depth. And so that could be either one of those things could be true. But I have to think that with the consistency in which we've been putting lineups out there, and the consistency in which these guys have played, you would think results would start happening. Like you would think they would start getting some coherence. And I think that was probably what was so frustrating about the last game is like, okay, these guys have played a lot of minutes together so far in these first 10 games. And then they come out in the second half of this game where they have a good shot to win. They're up 1-0 going into halftime. You're at home, just possess the ball, don't give it up, don't make stupid mistakes. And none of that happened. And so I think that's what made that game so frustrating. He's like, what is going on? So I would hope that like as these guys play more and more minutes together, as they get more and more cohesive as a team and as a unit, as a defense, as a midfield, that the results would start coming. And so that's kind of where I'm landing in this game is like I think there could be a chance that Memphis puts 2 or 3 past us, but if they are attacking and attacking us like crazy, that's where our counter game and a two and
Yeah.
Rovi and Blackstock, getting down the wings, and Mertz, and getting balls into the box. And if Kizza, Sterling, whoever's there, can get one or can get a couple that way as well. I could see it being a very Tulsa like 2-2 draw, and just being a fun game to watch. That's what I'm hoping
Yeah.
for anyway.
It's interesting when you sort of throw out the numbers as it relates to the percentage of time that the players have been on the field. It does make me think that there's really only a few spots that it seems that you could potentially tinker based on those numbers. So, like keeper, which we've talked about.
Yep.
You've talked about the Blackstock Rovey situation, so right back. And then really it's do you start with two forwards up top, or do you do one forward and a sample? And like that's kind of what it's been. Otherwise, the rest of the team is just that's who's there. So
Yep.
interesting. We'll
Yep.
have to watch how that plays out.
And what's
Um,
interesting about even those games where they started with one forward up top, you still have Kizza has 9 starts, no sub appearances. Deanne has played in 9 games. Sterling has played in 8 games. EJ has played in 4. So at some point in that game, they're getting 2 forwards on the field. It's just
yeah,
they're starting with maybe the idea of like, let's not let this team get up early, and let's go and let's shut the game down, and then let's go forward. And so maybe that's the reason he does it. Who knows?
yeah. All right, well, let's do this. Let's get our score predictions in. So, Lawrence from Memphis, he picked a 2-1 win. One other factor that may or may not play in my prediction. We talked a little bit about the field. AutoZone Park is a baseball stadium, and Lawrence did mention that the grounds crew are out there like with nails hammering turf in. Kenny said that they just approach it like they do any other field, which I don't know if I believe him. Like, there's got to be times that you're approaching the infield that you just got to watch yourself. I'm hoping for no injuries. But that is another factor to consider here. But Lawrence said 2-1 Memphis win. Bill Gordon over on YouTube, he picked a 2-1 Hounds win. And so that's just a reminder to everyone. If you go subscribe to us on YouTube, we'll put out a post and you can actually comment on the posts just like you can with any other social media. So yeah, go subscribe to us on YouTube. So we got 2-1 wins for opposite sides, depending upon who your team is. How do you see this playing out? Like, give me like a 2 or 3 sentence about how you see the game going, and then a score prediction.
I think based on the last 5, I think this one goes probably the Hounds' way. And um, I think Memphis plays in the Western Conference this year, so I think that changes things as far as like the Eastern Conference tends to be a little more defensive. Western Conference tends to be a little more high scoring. And so I do think that probably plays a factor in it as well. And then if you look at the last 5 games, I mean, the Hounds have outscored their opponents 8-5, 8-4. And so, are the gates opening as far as the goals happening? So I think I'm probably going to go right with Bill Gordon actually, and go with a 2-1 Hounds win.
I am gonna go. So I guess my summary is I think that trying to stop Bruno Lapa and Marlin is going to be difficult. Watching back some of their highlights from the most recent games, these guys got rockets for feet, and they're not just scoring from outside the box; they're getting into dangerous spots. So, considering some of the goals that we've given up recently, I don't think we're going to keep them off the score sheet. But I totally agree with the sentiment that if they are pressing forward, that they can be had at the back, especially if we can flood the box. That's where they've struggled in the past. So I think this is a case where if we're generating opportunities and we can capitalize on them, this could be a really fun, in my opinion, high scoring game. I'm going to go a 3-3 draw. I don't think that we necessarily drop points, but I don't know if we'll have enough to basically keep up with Memphis and like outdo them goal scoring wise. I hope I'm wrong, but yeah. So that's what we think. Obviously, let us know what you think. Another programming note: typically, we do like a summary show on Monday. We're gonna do this week. We're gonna do our live show on Sunday. I think we're gonna try to do Sunday at 7:30 p.m. And that'll be just sort of a post game reaction kind of thing. And so that's where everybody can jump on. You can find us on YouTube. You can join the comment section, be part of the conversation, share your thoughts. and we'll discuss all of them. But that show will primarily be just reflecting on what happened in the game. And then next week we've already got a bunch of interviews and stuff lined up, so we're going to try doing the same thing. We'll get the inside scoop from Indy. We'll try to get the inside scoop from what's going on in the Hounds. We'll do another prediction show like this, so that you'll have plenty of content, so that you are well prepared for the matchup on the weekend, and you'll have lots of stuff to listen to on a Saturday if you're looking to fill some time. So, Justin, any final thoughts on this one?
Nope. I'm excited. I'm actually more excited now than I've been all season long about what the
That's what I'm
Hounds
saying,
have done,
right?
which has been interesting because I walked away on Saturday. I was like, oh, this team sucks. And then I started digging into it. I was like, yeah, that was a rough. It was it was one bad half of over the
Yeah,
course of, several good games before that. And so I just and the Open Cup is what it is. And
yeah,
so I was trying to look like, all right, let me take the Open Cup out of it. Let me see what happened in the 10 games in the league. And the results from the last 10 games, the 10 games in the league, you take out those first 3 games, and the results have actually been pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what is going forward. And yeah, it was a bad start to the season, but we'll see what happens going forward.
agreed. All right, man. Thanks. We'll talk to all of you very, very soon.
See ya.